And this is Ken Kraetzer for Sons of the American Legion Radio. We're at the United States Military Academy and have a chance to visit the Department of Physics and Nuclear Engineering. And we have a chance to talk to two officers here, Colonel Edward Naessens, who's the department head, and Lieutenant Col Stacy Godshall, who is involved with the new program here of spaceflight and missile defense. A pleasure to talk with both of you gentlemen, and thank you for your service to our country. And Colonel, why don't we just start? If you would just describe a little bit about what the Department of Physics and Nuclear Engineering, some of the highlights of the department.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Department of Physics and Nuclear Engineering. Of course, you spell out that acronym PANE. We're the head of the house. I'm the head of the House of Pain. And of course, we have a lot of fun with that with our cadets, and it's an endearment term. The Department of Physics and Nuclear Engineering has responsibility for teaching. I like to say we develop leaders of character. Now, we do that through teaching physics and nuclear engineering. But our main focus is to develop leaders of character, and we do that by teaching core physics. Every cadet's got to take physics. And we also do that through a nuclear engineering major, which cadets can take that as a major, or advanced physics major. And we also now have recently developed, very recently, a space science major to support our space and missile defense program. So we have these three majors, and we also have minors associated with that. And we also teach a nuclear engineering core engineering sequence course. For every cadet who does not take an ABET engineering major, they must take an engineering sequence. And one of the 7 they could choose is nuclear. So we have a pretty heavy teaching load, one in which we enjoy immensely, all focus on developing cadets as leaders of character with a good broad-based understanding of space and science and in nuclear engineering.
And Colonel, if you would, just tell us a little bit about your career. I know you have a PhD from RPI, which is long associated with spaceflight and top engineering, and you've also been through infantry, armor. You're a ranger. You've really done a lot. You've been to Afghanistan, Egypt. Tell us a little bit about, if you would, some of the path of your career in the Army and educationally.
Well, I started out, graduated from West Point in 1981, and I was commissioned directly into the infantry. And as an infantry officer, I had great opportunities, great folks in which just inspired me to serve in the infantry. Served in Hawaii, served in Korea, served in Fort Drum, New York as an infantry officer, and got to the level of a brigade XO before the opportunity to become an academy professor was opened up at West Point. And so an academy professor is a permanent type professor here. You can serve up to 30 years of service in the Army as an instructor and a leader here at the academy. So I decided to compete for that and and got it. And so consequently, when I became an academy professor in 1996, went off to get my PhD program. And I've been serving really here at West Point on and off ever since. So I've been here since 1999. During that time, as you said, I deployed 6 times, 5 of those to Afghanistan, once to Iraq. 3 of those deployments were 12 months or greater. So I had an opportunity. The reason why I deploy is because I believe that I can better tell the story of what's going on in the Army, and also better associate with the cadets and provide some relevance of what we're doing here at the Academy as to what's going on in the Army. And so I need to know what's going on in the Army. So I've had plenty of opportunities to deploy. My last deployment, I just came out of Afghanistan as the Chief of Staff of the Combined Security Transition Command. And so lots of great experiences, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. And so I do. In fact, in my classroom on the bulletin boards, my boards are named after people that I've had experiences with in the Army, both good and bad. And so I take the opportunity in the classroom, to talk about those people in the classroom. And many of those names in the classroom are from my deployment experiences to Afghanistan, Iraq. There's some great news stories there, which I can share with the cadets. So it's just developmental opportunities.
Well, it's extraordinary service, and that's why I enjoy doing these interviews so much. And Lieutenant Colonel Godshall, tell us a little bit about your program and your career in the United States Army.
I think I'll start with the latter part of that question first, because that's what's really inspired me to want to pursue understanding the space environment and how the Department of Defense can leverage that environment and assets in that environment. So it really started before I even came into the Army. I was studying my undergraduate at Penn State University, and I took a couple of classes that were related to the space environment and also satellite communications. And after I enlisted in the Army as an infantry enlisted soldier, I then commissioned. And soon after I got commissioned, I heard that the Army, back in 1999, was going to start a career field for space operations. It's called the Functional Area 40 Space Operations. And so I was intrigued by that and kind of kept my eye on that throughout my entire career. And in fact, that was one of the things that inspired me to want to go into my first company command, which was in the Space and Missile Defense Command at a satellite control battalion. Now it's reflagged as the 53rd Signal Battalion. Their mission, and the mission that I was fortunate enough and blessed enough to be able to work with my soldiers on, was that of controlling communication satellites. And so a very strategic level asset, worked with some of the most intelligent soldiers in the Army, and they literally controlled multi-$1,000, million-dollar satellites. So fast forward from that, move forward a few years, and I got the opportunity to be selected by the department here to go get my graduate degree, and chose a school after being approved by the department that I could pursue a space physics degree. For me, that was the best of everything. I got to pursue an education in something that was space related, see how that could influence my understanding, and therefore hopefully the understanding of others in the Army, about how the physics of things that happen in space affect our operations, even down to the warfighter level. And that degree was actually coupled with a organization in San Antonio that does a lot of work for NASA. And so I got to work on some spacecraft components and systems that are in the space environment right now, one of which is studying Jupiter's magnetosphere. And so I got to do a lot of that, and the department and Colonel Naessens realized that I was very passionate about space, and I was selected to come back as a second-time rotating faculty member. And that was about the time that the Department of Physics and Nuclear Engineering started to consider the inception of this Space and Missile Defense program. And Colonel Naessens asked me if, well, I don't even know if he asked me, sir, but I think he asked me and tasked me to be the first program director of that. And that was incredible, because I got to be able to think about what we wanted to incorporate into our program. Got to benchmark it against other aspirant institutions and other institutions that we are trying to emulate the good things that they've done and employ their best practices and make it even better. And so, and that's what's gotten us to this point. Been able to develop the program, incorporate classes that we think cadets are going to need to be the leaders of the future Army, and in what Army leaders are now calling multi-domain battle, where the space domain is critical to everything we do. And that's where we're at right now.
Well, sir, that's terrific, and an amazing career projection you've had from Penn State to here to West Point. And Colonel Nason, tell us a little bit about why physics is an important study for students in high school. You don't see as many people studying physics in college, and certainly with the growing importance of STEM majors, physics is so important to that. And why is the study of physics so important for students to continue with, in high school and then beyond?
The majors that we offer here, physics, nuclear engineering, and space science, I feel are important for the future of this nation. I mean, if you think about it, it's not the final frontier. It's just the next frontier, space. And the Army is certainly expanding its interest in space. The Department of Defense is the whole world is expanding their interest in space. And so we are trying to really get ahead of that here in the department with our space science major, trying to get ahead of that. What's next? We're trying to anticipate what's next, trying to get a research program going together so we can make contributions to the future in technology as well as policy, because our cadets are well-rounded in being able to do policy as well as technology. So these future space operators that we're talking about, we're looking to develop them for the future of this country. And I think there's great opportunity there. And that's what physics does. That's what space science does. It'll provide graduates that can go out there and solve some of these very highly technical problems. And they're all based, all engineering is based in physics. Everything is based in physics. So having a grounding in physics and understanding science and the contributions of science is certainly going to expand all kinds of capability in a very technically advanced world that's getting even more technically advanced. And so our physics major is designed to do that. Our physics major is designed to provide cadets a base of knowledge in a lot of areas, to include lasers, optics, as well as thermodynamics, statistical mechanics, quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is the study of the microscopic world. And then we also have space, which is a study of the macroscopic world, a huge universe. So we study everything from the subatomic through space and everything in between. And so we study that so that people understand how it all works. We have a lot to understand left. We have an awful lot to understand in terms of our physical world and what's next and what's out there. We're making discoveries all the time, and we need scientists to be able to reason through these and figure these problems out and provide those solutions to our next generation. So that's what we're trying to do.
Well, that's a remarkable course of study here at West Point for the physics and nuclear engineering majors. And maybe we'll just ask Colonel Godshall just a little bit about in the space flight and missile defense program, some of the aspects that are studied. I certainly go back to when my dad was in the Nike missile project in the 1950s, an Army officer, and how far it's come. The Patriot missile is so important for defense today. What are some of the things that a cadet would study in your program that would help them when they go out to the Army?
So as I previously mentioned, we benchmarked the program against other leading institutions, and one of the things we quickly realized is that we had the opportunity to leverage a number of things for our program that other institutions didn't. And part of that is the synergy that we could build to couple space science and missile defense together, because we already had a very robust program that in the department here that incorporated things like optics, lasers, and so forth. And so those are things that cadets need to understand that tie into missile defense as well. So in that benchmarking, we also realized that we needed to include classes in astronautics, space physics, or AKA the space environment, astronomy, and astrophysics, as well as courses in remote sensing and military geospatial operations. So those topics and those courses are really the heart of the program. Things that we believe every Army officer needs to be cognizant of because they affect everything on the battlefield, from the warfighter on the ground to strategic level missile defense. So in particular in the thread that incorporates things like electromagnetism, optics, and lasers, and also remote sensing, cadets will learn many different aspects of what is needed to think about critical problems that involve missile defense. And also the courses in astronautics, astronomy, and space physics allow cadets and future leaders to understand what they're going to need to with regard to how the Army and DoD uses space assets, and how those assets affect all operations.
And I'd also like to add on to that, not only are we getting the technical expertise in the major, but also cadets have a broad liberal education. And so they understand the social sciences, they understand history, they understand cultural aspects. And so our cadets are able to take all that experience and not only be great technical problem solvers, but also be great policy problem solvers. They have a unique capability because of the broad liberal education we have, as well as the technical education they have in the space science major, and they bring it all together. So they will ultimately, in one of our courses, which is a integration course, really develop a policy associated with some problem associated with space. And so they have a tremendous capability, and that's what our Functionary 40 officers, what we're looking for in them, and the Army's looking for that kind of capability.
And I know when we've talked to the academic dean, Colonel Cindy Jebb, she, coming from a kind of a sociology background, always points out the importance of liberal arts to the formation of a U.S. Army officer. Colonel, just I know we're going to take a little look at some of your equipment. What are some of the physical resources that you have in the department?
Great. I'd like to say one other thing, too. It was no accident we brought Stacy Godshall back. We needed his expertise. And at the same time we were bringing him back, we're also getting a brand new building. This building has been through an upgrade. It was completely gutted and rebuilt. And so these outstanding facilities you see here are rather new. Part of that upgrade in this building included an observatory. We wanted to make sure that we had a state-of-the-art observatory, and we do, up on the top floor of this building. Those upgrades also included a particle accelerator. Much of the space that we study includes particle interactions with materials, with space station. You know, how do particles interact with the space station out in space? So we can make those kinds of studies with our particle accelerators. We also have a clean room in which we can conduct satellite construction. And we have sent up satellite packages from this department and the electroengineering computer science department in space. So we have a clean room to do that. Additionally, we have a subcritical facility here, which is really a facility that we can do counting experiments with creating neutrons, and those are particles that can also interact with matter. And additionally, we have a state-of-the-art machine shop. The machine shop, here we have to build a lot of our experiments, so we do them. We have a 3D printing capability, so some things we have to create in order to do the experiments that we have to do to support the Space and Missile Defense Program, our advanced physics major, and nuclear engineering majors. We like to say we're pretty fortunate here. Most undergraduate programs in physics might have a particle accelerator. Most of them don't. They might have a subcritical facility. Most of them don't. And they might have an observatory. Most of them don't. We've got them all. And we've been able to integrate those as part of our education to get in the classroom, as well as providing some research opportunities for our cadets to go beyond and support some research needs for the good of the Army.
Colonel, that's terrific, and we're going to appreciate the chance to look at some of your resources here at West Point.
Okay, this is going to be eventually, as we develop the major and the courses, this is going to be a little classroom area where we'll be able to use some of our telescopes. We actually have a platform right outside here where we can put telescopes on this platform for nighttime observations, or even with the proper filters, we can do daytime observations of the sun. All right, so we can go by, take a look at the platform, and if you go through that door up there, we can actually go and see the observatory, which is pretty fascinating, pretty interesting.
Good.
Sure, yeah, this is a platform where we bring telescopes and make observations day and night time. You can see we also have some weather testing equipment. This equipment's actually here to support our lasers program. We're looking to characterize this kind of climate here and how lasers would actually propagate through that climate. So we need to take a lot of weather data. So that's what they're doing here with this particular station. And right behind you, you can see the dome to the observatory, and we'll go in there in just a moment. That door opens up, so the huge telescope we have can actually look out into space. Two of our former faculty are astronauts. Colonel Tim Creamer, now retired, he was an astronaut on the International Space Station, so he was up there. And we also had another faculty member, Lieutenant Colonel then, Mark Vandehei, who is now Colonel, and he is up in space now as we speak on the International Space Station. So 2 of our former faculty are astronauts.
And I do want to ask you about Ed White, who was a graduate of the Academy and one of the early pioneer astronauts, sadly died in the Apollo fire early in that program. Just talk a little bit about his legacy.
Well, anybody with who has that kind of career pattern, he's been able to be an astronaut. Certainly someone that a lot of people want to emulate. I mean, he's certainly an example of what right looks like, both in character, both in desire to advance the human condition. And so, when we lose people like that, it really hurts all of us. Yeah.
Go.
Here we are with our 16-inch Meade telescope, which is located in our observatory. As you can see here with the dome has the capability to open up so that the telescope can see out into space, as well as rotate. Okay, and this is state of the art. We have the capability to track satellites and moving satellites and planets. As the telescope moves to track them, the dome will move with it. So all state of the art, and we're pretty proud of this facility. Okay, and in this room, this is where it's a clean room. All right, so all the particles that might be caused some kind of contamination for anything that might go in space or in rockets is removed. And so we actually build satellites in our clean room. And like I said, we've actually sent up, along with the electrical engineering computer science department, satellites in space. And so we've got some stuff up there now. Let me just say, we do not have a nuclear reactor at West Point. This is not a nuclear reactor. It's what we call a subcritical facility. And so, what that means is it can't stay critical on its own. And it just never reached that point. And so we can actually put neutron sources in here, and the uranium that's in these slugs here will actually multiply, and we'll be able to do some neutron counting experiments. And we'll be able to get neutrons off, and we can make use of doing radiation experiments with those as well. So we have this tremendous capability to do neutron counting experiments. But this will not produce any power whatsoever. And what that does is we create particles in here and in this tube here, usually protons and alpha particles. And then this big tube here accelerates them at very, very fast speeds. Okay? And all of this is in a vacuum. And then once they're accelerated across this tube, then we use these magnets to steer them into a target chamber, and also to focus the beam into a very tight beam, very small area. And all that is focused and converted inside here into a target chamber, at which these protons will hit the targets in here, or the alpha particles hit the targets in here, and then we can do experiments to see the impact of radiation on materials, or whatever experiment that we may have. And so we're pretty proud of this facility. This is going to give us a lot of capability whatsoever to study space and also physics, as well as nuclear engineering.
And it's Ken Kraetzer for Sons of American Legion Radio. We're back at West Point with Colonel Ed Naessens and Lieutenant Colonel Stacy Godshall. Appreciate the tour of this remarkable science building here at West Point. And Lieutenant Colonel Godshall, just tell us a little bit about what's the best thing for you teaching, working with these world-class students, cadets, and when you see them progress, graduate, go out to the Army. What is the whole experience of teaching at West Point like for you?
Well, the response to that is a very long list of things that make it so wonderful to work here. As you kind of mentioned, world-class cadets. Cadets come here because of the stringent admission requirements. They're already phenomenal people when they get here, and being able to work with them is undeniably a privilege. And to see them, to answer your question about seeing them progress and seeing what they are starting to do for the Army is a wonderful thing too. As Colonel Nason mentioned, I came back for a second tour, and I did that back in January 2015. And some of the cadets that we taught in our department that were graduates of 2015, 2016, they've stayed in touch, and we've been able to talk about how they're progressing in their career, and for a couple of them in particular, how they're progressing to advance towards hopefully becoming space operations officers. And That's been a phenomenal experience. For me as a non-cadet to also see how they develop in all pillars of their development, physical, mental, and military-wise, it's amazing. Because I didn't have those experiences when I was an undergrad, and to be able to be exposed to that as a faculty member is an excellent opportunity. The other facet on the short list of the very long list of things that make it wonderful to work here, as you've heard previously from Colonel Naessens and as you saw on the tour, phenomenal world-class classrooms and facilities. Couldn't ask for a better opportunity to explore research opportunities for all faculty members that we have here. So those are just some of the big highlights. I could go on for hours about why it's so wonderful to work here and all the people and the peers and senior leaders, the best senior leaders that I've had in my Army experience. But I know our time is short, so I'll cut the short list there. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Godshall, and thank you for your service to our country. You're having an amazing career in the Army. And Colonel Naessens, sort of the same thing. What do you like about teaching physics, nuclear engineering here at West Point? What you see in your cadets as they progress? And I know you had two proteges on the football team this year. Brett Toth, the right tackle, we just saw playing the Senior Bowl, and Blake Wilson, who had some key field goals and extra points as a kicker on the Army team. They're both physics majors. Just tell us a little bit about what it's like for you as a department head here at the Department of Physics and Engineering.
Of course, I like to say the ultimate weapon on the battlefield is the cadet physicist in the attack. When you think of those two football players, Brett Toth and Blake Wilson, I had the privilege to actually educate and work with them, inspire them last semester while they took PH 484 quantum mechanics. Football players taking quantum mechanics. You don't hear about that too often because that's a challenge. Quantum mechanics is a challenge. But, guys like Brett Toth and Blake Wilson, they're the kind of guys that love to step up to a challenge. I mean, that's why they're playing Division I level football. That's a challenge in itself. And they can overcome any kind of challenge. They decided to take a very interesting road in the academics, taking physics. That's not for the faint of heart. It's a tough discipline. I think most people will agree to that. And it takes a lot of time, a lot of preparation, a lot of effort. And they've been able to do that as Division I football players. And I give them a lot of credit. They are some very special people, as well as all the cadets here. There's no doubt about that. But I do want to recognize Brett Toth and Blake Wilson for overcoming that challenge of being physics majors, as well as playing Division I football. That's a pretty tremendous challenge. And they've been able to succeed very well. They're doing extremely well, and they always will. There's no doubt in my mind that the effort they put in that football field is the same effort they put in the classroom. So they develop that habit of mind to always just work hard and overcome challenges. That's part of them. And so, good on them. That's certainly been a privilege. But I would say that just about nearly every cadet that I've had experiences here at West Point. Good people just always stepping up to challenges and looking for those opportunities to take their experiences and make something of them, and make something of themselves, and make something of everybody around them. It's great to work with the people we have here. Sometimes people say the challenge is to get those troops to take that hill. I think our challenge here is trying to hold them back. They're always wanting to take that hill and go to that next step. And working in that kind of environment with those kinds of people is very rewarding.
Well, it's a pleasure to visit with you both and hear about this very important department, physics and nuclear engineering here at the United States Military Academy. Lieutenant Colonel Stacy Godshall and Colonel Ed Naessens, thank you both for your service to our country from all of us at the American Legion. Great to visit with you today. This is Ken Kraetzer for Sons of American Legion Radio at the United States Military Academy.